Moses Williams, cutter of profiles. Moses Williams was born into slavery in 1777 to parents Scarborough and Lucy. The family was held in bondage by a Maryland plantation owner who commissioned a painting from a Philadelphia artist named Charles Willson Peale. Peale, a portrait painter, accepted Scarborough and Lucy as payment for painting the portrait of this Maryland aristocrat. Using the lives and labor of enslaved Africans to barter and trade was a common practice in America at this time. It is recorded that Charles Willson Peale supported the abolitionist movement later in life, but earlier in his career he accepted enslaved people as payment for his artwork. In 1780, the Pennsylvania Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery was passed, which changed the status of an enslaved person to technically indentured, and then required that they be released from servitude completely at age 28. Moses Williams' father, Scarborough, was immediately freed according to this new law, and his mother, Lucy, was freed eventually. They changed their names to John and Phyllis Williams when they gained their freedom. However, the young Moses was still legally owned by Peale, and would presumably be kept in bondage for over 20 years until he turned 28. Charles Willson Peale had 17 children of his own, 13 surviving into adulthood, most of which were instructed in the fine arts. He named his sons and daughters after famous European artists: Rembrandt, Raphael, Rubens, Angelica Kauffman, etc. The Peale siblings often contested with each other for their father's favorable judgment. Rembrandt Peale, the second son of Charles Peale's children, had scathing and derogatory remarks about Moses, stating that he was completely worthless. This was the environment that Moses Williams grew up in. In addition to being an artist, Charles Willson Peale became a scientist, inventor, naturalist, and collector of natural curiosities. He painted numerous portraits, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and more, which he displayed in his own museum in Philadelphia, in the same building as Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. The museum held a large naturalist collection, including artifacts from First Nation peoples that were acquired during the Lewis and Clark expedition. Moses Williams, along with the Peale children, worked in the museum. One of Moses's work duties was to dress up in the traditional garments of Native Americans and walk through the town to advertise the museum. In 1802, a device called a cyanotrace was created by an inventor named John Isaac Hawkins, who was a friend of Peale. The cyanotrace was used to render a contour portrait of a person's profile. The operator of the device traced the sitter's profile while a system of levers and fulcrums would simultaneously copy and reduce the design by embossing the outline onto a sheet of paper. The reduced profile was cut out of the middle of the sheet and placed over a darker colored paper or black silk. Prior to photography, this device was a way to produce a fairly accurate and unique portrait of a person at a conveniently small scale. Though Moses Williams may not have been given instruction in the fine art of painting, he was very interested in the cyanotrace. He took to the device and quickly became proficient with the complex and subtle operation of the mechanism, as well as cutting and mounting the silhouettes. This was good timing because right about then, there was an explosion in the popularity of silhouette portraits. There were many reasons for the growing interest in silhouettes. Photography was yet to be developed. Painted or drawn portraits required the subject to sit still for hours, and it was not cheap. But the silhouettes took just a few minutes to trace, and was seen as a democratic form of portraiture, appropriate for the young democracy, because it was accessible financially and represented all people equally, regardless of their wealth or status. For example, you couldn't tell if a person was wearing expensive clothes or is rich or poor from their profile. Often the paper may be folded once or twice, providing 2 or even 4 copies. The cyanotrace portraits were all the rage, and so Williams and Peale came to an agreement. Moses Williams would cut the profiles for patrons of the museum and would charge first 6 and then 8 cents apiece. In the first year, Moses Williams cut around 8,000 silhouettes and was allowed to keep the profits. It is reported that Moses Williams was released from servitude a year early. Some say he cut his way to freedom 8 cents at a time. After he was legally free, Moses set up shop in the museum and continued to cut portraits. He cut portraits for many notable people, including a delegation of First Nation leaders from various indigenous nations who were invited by Thomas Jefferson to travel to Washington, D.C. to negotiate treaties. So, the group of 28 delegates arrive in D.C., but at some point 12 of them and their interpreter visited Peale's museum in Philadelphia, and a number of them sat to have their portraits made by Moses Williams. The Hawara, Sagesaka, and Meheneka were some of the leaders from a variety of indigenous nations that had their portraits taken that day. And since multiple copies were made, the Smithsonian still has an original set of these portraits. Moses' silhouettes drew people to the Peale Museum and helped its popularity. Moses Williams also enjoyed financial success for his own efforts. He got married and bought a 2-story house. 50 years after his death, there was an article written about him in a Philadelphia newspaper. He was described by people who knew him as being witty, pleasant, and an expert at his vocation. Recently, there was a silhouette of Moses Williams found in the Library Company of Philadelphia. It is suspected that he somehow created the silhouette himself. Moses Williams, cutter of profiles, it reads on the front. Moses Williams, the cutter of profiles, it reads on the back. The Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. hosted an exhibit titled Blackout, Silhouettes Then and Now. Moses Williams' work was featured alongside contemporary works by artists like Kara Walker and Kumi Yamashita. This exhibition delves into the evolution of silhouettes in art, presenting historical pieces from the 18th century through to the works of modern silhouette artists. This presentation was based on the research of Dr. Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw, Director of History, Research and Scholarship, and Senior Historian at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. Additional information was also sourced from Dr. Ellen Fernandez Sacco, independent scholar and genealogist, also the Peale Museum, and the Jefferson Monticello. Support for the production of this presentation came from the Peale Museum, and is part of a project financed in part with state funds from the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, an instrumentality of the state of Maryland. Project contents or opinions do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of the Maryland Heritage Area Authority. My name is Dirk Joseph. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of Moses Williams, cutter of profiles.